Welcome in. In this video, we're going to discuss rapid spanning tree. Now, I know that we've discussed a little bit about rapid spanning tree as we've gone through the other slide decks and through the lab that we've just completed. However, I wanted to stop at this point and talk about rapid spanning tree in depth, at least as in-depth as the CCNA gets. And of course, after this slide deck, like we did with regular spanning tree, we'll go back to our lab and show you how rapid spanning tree works and do the little convergence test like we did with regular spanning tree. So without further ado, what is ado and why would we want further of it? Let's start our discussion. Now, as we've seen in our lab, 802.1d spanning tree can take a long time to converge in the event of a network failure or a network recovery. You'll see that we failed our network. We saw it took about 20 seconds for the network to figure out that something had failed. Then we fixed the failure, and it took another 20 seconds for the network to realize, oh, you fixed this failure, I need to reconverge again. And as we've discussed, Cisco's proprietary extensions to spanning tree, the PortFast and the BPDU guard extensions, they help this convergence issue, but obviously since they are Cisco proprietary, they don't work with non-Cisco equipment. So if you have a Juniper or an HP switch, you can't use PortFast on an HP switch. It just doesn't support it. At least it's not called PortFast. The IEEE came up with a new spanning tree protocol to address these issues, and it is the 802.1w RSTP, Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol. Now, as we'll discuss, RSTP is very similar to the 802.1d, the old spanning tree protocol. And in fact, if you happen to have some switches on your network that don't support RSTP, for those network segments, switches that are configured for RSTP will actually fall back and support the standard 802.1d spanning tree protocol. So first, let's start off and talk about the similarities to the spanning tree protocol. Like spanning tree, RSTP elects the root bridge using the same criteria, which is the priority plus the MAC address. It chooses a root or designated port on each switch using the same criteria. For root ports, it is the shortest path to the root, and for designated ports, it is the highest priority port on that particular network segment. And of course, rapid spanning tree forwards traffic or blocks traffic based on the same criteria, although blocking ports act a little differently in rapid spanning tree than they do in regular spanning tree, and we'll talk about that here in just a bit. Obviously, there are some differences between regular spanning tree, or what's the point of having the RSTP protocol? Rapid spanning tree has different port types and port roles than the regular spanning tree protocol, and I've got a couple of tables that show this a little later in the slide deck. You know how I mentioned that blocking ports act a little different? Well, in the rapid spanning tree, they're called discarding ports. In regular spanning tree, if you have a port that is blocking, it's not processing anything across that port. It's ignoring BPDUs, it's ignoring network traffic, ARP requests, MAC table entries, so on and so forth. It just acts like you've unplugged the cable from that port. With rapid spanning tree, you still aren't going to forward ARP requests and MAC table updates and user traffic through a blocking port, or a discarding port, as rapid spanning tree calls it. However, it will still listen to the BPDUs coming in on that port so that it can determine, yes, I can still get to the root going through this other port. And we'll talk about how that all works here in just a little bit. It's really kind of neat how it all works. In rapid spanning tree, the listening and learning states don't take 15 seconds each like they do in the regular spanning tree. All of this adds up to faster convergence, and you'll see this in the lab. We'll go through the same process of breaking our spanning tree VLANs while we're running that continuous ping, and you'll see that instead of taking 20 seconds, it takes about 5. So now that we've talked about some of the similarities and differences, let's focus in on the differences because we already know how regular spanning tree works. Let's start off with the port states. Now you'll recall in regular 802.1d spanning tree, you had the 5 port states. Well, 4 technically. Disabled is the cable's unplugged or it's admin down or something like that. But you've got blocking, listening, learning, and forwarding. With rapid spanning tree, you only have 3 potential port states. If a port is not forwarding traffic, it is said to be discarding, and that corresponds with either the blocking or the listening state in 802.1d spanning tree. Again, if you'll recall just from the last slide, when a rapid spanning tree port is in discarding state, it will still listen for BPDUs in case its root port goes down, but it just won't act on those BPDUs unless it's needed. Learning and forwarding are the same port states as in regular spanning tree, although as we've mentioned, the learning state doesn't take 15 seconds like it does in regular spanning tree. We'll pause here. We'll pick up our discussion of rapid spanning tree in the next video.